Hello, everybody. This is Eric Saunders, the Green-Eyed Bandit, and we are here for another episode of Community Conversations. And it's awesome because we are on episode 18, and we have had our roller coasters. We've had our ups and downs. And when I say ups and downs, we have definitely had our ups and downs, which really kind of leads to the conversation that we're going to have tonight regarding mental health and why it matters. And I think we're now coming into an age where when we look back in the past that we are still growing and we're really taking on a lot so fast that we have to question, is our mind really able, or is it functionally dealing with everything that's in front of us in a effective manner? So we have some awesome guests, but first I would like to introduce our co-host for the evening. She's been here before, both as a panelist and a co-host, because why? She's dope like that. And so I wanted to say thank you, Ebony. You are, and if you guys do not know, she does a lot here in the city with community activism. She also is a communicator such as myself, but I feel that she does it in such effective manner. I remember listening to her in the early mornings on Sundays when I was out Uber driving, and I was like, oh man, Ebony sure do know how to ask them questions. So I'm looking forward to co-hosting another evening tonight with you, Ebony. Ebony, how are you doing?
I am doing great. Thank you for such a warm introduction. You do that so well. You're just good at warming up spaces. So I appreciate that. But I'm doing well this evening. I'm so excited to be here. I just want to say thank you to you and the whole team at Tease Me. Want to say thank you to Tamika for even asking, and presenting the opportunity. So I definitely appreciate it. And I'm very, very excited about our conversation this evening. I know it's going to be a heavy one, but this is a topic that is near and dear to my heart. So I'm really looking forward to getting into it and helping some folks.
Me too. And just like you said, I wanted to give a shout out to Tamika Catchings. Thank you, Tamika Catchings, Tease Me family, for, us just investing in this time together to have these conversations and see where it might lead. And, I know you are out handling business tonight. And so, hey, we get
Bring it home, that W.
Yeah. That's yes.
That's how you say it in sports, right? I'm not good at sports,
right.
But I think that's what y'all say.
Bring home the W. You got that right. And so we also want to give a shout out to Miss Veronica. Veronica, I know you are there. And she's going to be watching, ladies and gentlemen, from our news feed. So right now, if you are watching and you've been tuning in with us, this is a perfect opportunity to hit that share button, hit that like button, go to the Tease Me Cafe, Indy, and like that page and get over there and have some tea. But let's get the word out because a lot of people are dealing with this, and we all need to create a new sense of collective awareness around this conversation of mental health and its own levels. And so, again, thank you, Veronica. Thank you, Vaughn, who is our IT person and our communications person who's behind the curtain. So, all right. So now I want to get into our panelists and have them introduce themselves to you. And I'm looking forward to everything that you have to bring to the conversation tonight. Who would like to go first? Ladies first. I'm old school, but who would like to go first? We're going to do bubblegum in a dish.
Okay. I was going to say, do we need to pick?
I'm okay to go first.
Go ahead.
Thank you guys again for having me back on. It is such a pleasure to be here with you tonight to talk about something that's so passionate for me. My name is Kamish Nunley. I am a wife for 15 years now. We just celebrated our 15th anniversary last weekend.
Congratulations.
A mother of, thank you, 3 ambitious children. I'm a servant and I'm also a student. So I'm a licensed mental health counselor. I have my own private practice here in Carmel, Indiana. I also serve as a trauma specialist. So that's about me.
All right. Ooh, I'm gonna throw questions at you on top of questions. Old school Geraldo style.
Oh, Geraldo.
Listen, he went all the way back with that
Yeah,
one.
yeah.
Next, we're gonna be talking about Donahue.
Yeah,
Right.
hey, him too. Sally Jesse?
Sally Jesse Raphael.
Yeah.
Clearly, we watched a lot of TV as kids. Clearly, yeah.
Way too much.
Yeah.
Okay, Anna?
So my name is Anna Peters, and I am a behavior analyst. I work primarily with children right now who have autism. I've worked in a variety of settings, including schools, clinics. I've gone into patients' homes before, providing therapy to them to try to live an independent life as much as possible. I'm really passionate about helping people really find that full quality of life where they can really live their full potential, I guess, out in life. And so I am thrilled to be here. I am so grateful that I can be a part of this conversation. Like others have said, I feel that this is so important to have, especially in this day and time. So I'm excited about moving forward with the conversation. Thank you for having me.
And thank you for being here. Ladies and gentlemen, we also have, as you know, every month we tend to, and this even goes back to our poetry nights. We always had a visual artist, and it's so great. And I want to give a shout out to Gang Gang real quick for the wonderful, incredible, and my homeboy Nigel Long, Alan Bacon, and so I just wanted to say that was incredible. And so we have our artist here tonight. And Miss Miranda, would you like to introduce yourself and also tell us about the work that you are bringing into the atmosphere this evening?
Hi, everybody. My name is Miranda Byrd, and I am an artist in residency here at Aton Center in Anderson, Indiana. We're a community art center / art gallery. I teach art classes here for children, and we sometimes do wine and canvases. And Veronica asked me to join you guys tonight, and I will be creating a piece that is based off of my own mental health experiences and what I have went through life dealing with them. So yeah.
That's awesome. And I mean, that's what it is. I know art is expression. And I applaud you for, choosing to be brave and to be creative. I miss that. So that's why I said, let me go ahead and come out here, and I got my wall back behind me. And it's just so cool because a lot of these artists did their thing this weekend too. And so it's really been great watching the growth of our visual artists here in the city. They're doing some major things.
Absolutely.
All right. So again, ladies and gentlemen, if you're watching, let's get into it. Again, the discussion for tonight, we're going to talk about mental health. But just know that over the year, this is episode 18. And so we that's a lot of subject matter. And from racism, from sexism, from, homophobia, from, social equity, and I mean, just everything. And now here we are, and it's Suicide Awareness Month. Let me first bring acknowledgement to that. And everybody that's, contributing to great awareness about that today is actually Suicide Awareness Day. And I don't know, about my panelists here, or you that are out here watching, but I'm an 80s baby, 90s made, and I just did not remember it being so frequent. And so, and now, as I'm getting, my 30s, it's at least 3 or 4 people a year I know, personally, that choose that route. But then you also have to ask yourself, how much effort are we going to have to put forth to change the culture? And that's what we're going to get into tonight. So we got some folks that are on the front line, and And I know you guys are looking forward to. So whatever question you have, if you're watching on Facebook, please shoot it. We're going to definitely get your questions. But we have some questions already. Ebony, are you ready?
I am ready. I am. So, you set us up so nicely by talking about how prevalent it seems to be these days, hearing that people are dealing with suicide, which, when you look at, some of the things that contribute to people making that choice, sometimes it is, things that they're dealing with mentally. We are living in some rough times right now. And people are adapting to it in different ways. So I would like our panelists to speak to how intentional we have to be individually about taking care of our mental health. Kamish, let's go ahead and start with you.
Awesome. That is a great question in terms of the importance of being intentional and prioritizing our mental health. It's absolutely critical that we prioritize it, especially in today's divided climate, being at the, heighten of racial tensions, injustices, coming off of COVID and dealing with the psychological and emotional impact of that, dealing with violence in our community. Like, it's super important that we focus in right now as a result of those things and many other things, to be very intentional about how we prioritize mental health and paying close attention to what mental illnesses might be creating themselves within us as we go through these things. Whatever we give intentionality to or intention to grows. And if you pay particular attention to your mental health, you are prioritizing your ability to be emotionally resilient, become more emotionally and mentally aware, and also, increasing the probability of you coming out of other major stressors more successfully. So if you can focus in on it now, it sets you up to have a better chance of overcoming it later as things arise.
Yeah, thank you, Kamish. Anna, I want to have you speak to some examples of how people can start becoming intentional about it. Kamish did a great job of explaining what some of the benefits can be of doing so, but what are some examples that you would give people to get started?
So an example that comes to mind, speaking from experience, past positions that I've held, I have felt that it was difficult to request time off for, like, what we call mental health days now. And looking back, like, I think I know why. I felt that it was socially unacceptable to, for me, more so to take off for a mental health day versus for like a physical ailment or, something like that. Mm-hmm. So I think that more people are talking about it. I think change will start, having conversations like these, and employers and employees having those conversations, in the workplace, to, open that door for people to feel more comfortable, seeking that help and taking time off from work to take care of their mind, take care of their mental health. So I definitely am a huge proponent of education and educating people on the importance of taking that time away if they need to. So I think, definitely educating yourself, researching, and being intentional about researching is very important. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah. I think it gives people a lot to work with. And Eric, something, that stuck out for me is about the researching. I found that to be beneficial in my personal life. Just reading different articles and learning tips and tricks there online, because, everybody doesn't have access to the same level of resources. So that was one that really stuck out to me as far as a good tip to take moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Hey, Miranda, you in this conversation too. So we want to know, as you're painting, you got your right brain going, you know. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm focused.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it looks like you're working on a fairy of some sort. Is that how you would describe her?
An elf fairy, yeah. Yeah, I completely agree. Not everybody has the same resources, so it's really difficult for some people to reach out with those not being available to them.
And it's, as you say that, I think we're kind of in agreement in terms of, I think this comes down to equity and accessibility, and also I think just people having a knowledge of it. So whether the know that it's out there, or even the willingness, or just even knowing that there's a way out. And I guess the question, to follow up with, just that broad thought was, do you think people of color are less likely to seek help for mental health? And if so, why?
Go ahead.
Sorry. I definitely think so. I think there's a stigma there attached to people of color having, especially with men, having to be strong for their family.
And what do you think that's contributed to?
Just the past and the way that they're raised. I know, like, for my brother, he was always taught to be the man of the household, because we didn't grow up with a dad. Mm-hmm. So from a very young age, he was taught that, he needs to be the one that grows up to be the provider for a family. And, if you cry, suck it up. Or if you're feeling some type of way, suck it up, because you're going to have to be the man of the house.
So would you think that's being described as toxic masculinity? Is that what what it's
definitely,
being?
Definitely.
Okay.
I think that's a really big problem, especially in a lot of Black communities. And I feel like now it's getting a lot better, but there's still that stigma there.
Yeah. And even I know toxic masculinity is one of those things coming down. And what I see now, man, is going on in society is a lot of terms and phrases is getting coined real fast. And toxic masculinity, I don't know how long that's kind of been in common verbiage, but I think it kind of got, when it first hit, that term hit, and toxic masculinity, you just keep hearing it, but then you look a little bit deeper, the whole situation is toxic.
Mm-hmm. There's so many levels. Yeah. Kamish, what is your perspective as a mental health professional? Like, have you seen any trends in this direction?
Absolutely. And my answer to the question was going to be, yes, African Americans or people of color are less likely to reach out. However, they have become more and more open to the ideal. And what I've noticed over the years, as the reason being for them being less likely, are four main reasons. One, the historical backlash of reaching out. Back in the slavery days, we were cultivated to believe that if we talked about any level of problems within our home, we could potentially be killed. And so it was the job of the mom to silence the kids, the job of the father to silence the mom with regards to anything that was going on in the home. And I think that that's where that, what goes on in our home stays in our home sort of kind of came from. And then also the three types of stigma that I think it was Miranda alluded to, the self-stigma, the social stigma, the structured or systemic stigma that comes along with and a person of color, reaching out for help. And then another one that I found to trend quite often is that why people reach out to me is that, there's less people of color actually doing this work. And men, women alike like to feel like they're sitting before someone that they can relate to, that they don't have to describe the African-American experience to, or they can feel valid in what they're experiencing, like when they walk around stores or describing being pulled over.
Yeah.
Does
like that add a little extra pressure or,
For me, no. It doesn't add extra pressure for me just because I've witnessed it, I've seen it, I understand it. And I feel like people interpret things based on where they are in life. And that's where I want to meet them in their experience. And so it doesn't provide pressure for me. I just really want to seek to understand the position and how they've experienced things.
And I think it's cool that you have that filter.
Yeah.
Being able to understand the pressures that come with having to code switch.
Yes.
And every person that may have your title still may not be competent to that because a certain level of that has to be felt with our own personal judgments, because everybody's situation not the same. It could kind of be filtered into, similar situations, but it's one of those situations where everybody's point is very much so valid. And, story is very much so valid. So
yeah, that cultural competency piece is like so important, that the professionals have that. I have a few friends that are therapists, and that's one of the things that is discussed like on a regular basis, like how important that is, and I also think about the importance of representation. I watch a lot of really old TV shows, and one day I was watching Sanford and Son, which is one of my favorites. And yes, there was an episode, I was blown away because y'all know how old that TV show is. This show was on in the 70s. So I was blown away. There was an episode where the father and son were into an argument with one another, and they were like not really getting along. And then the son went to therapy, and his therapist was a Black man. And this was in the 70s. And I was like, oh my God.
Yeah, right.
Why don't more people know about this episode? Because it's not one of the things that people normally talk about. So I'm just like, were they too like ahead of the game when they did this, or like what was it? Because I feel like if there was more representation of that and it was normalized, then we would embrace it more. And Kamish brought up a good point about feeling safe in those spaces. There are things that have been in the DSM, which is like the book where all the mental illnesses are like categorized or whatever. There's been things in there that were like very anti-Black. So it's like you could be diagnosed with like whatever made up disease, and it basically just means like you're Black, and you're then stigmatized. Like there's all this crazy stuff that goes along with it.
Your stigmatizing is documented.
And it's documented, which makes us unsafe. That's why, I think that there's like layers to like why we haven't embraced it. But I love that there's people like the folks on this panel, Therapy for Black Girls, those different resources that are starting to try to open it up some more. So I just wanted to raise some awareness around that.
And I think you have. And so if we're doing this, and ladies and gentlemen, if you're watching, again, spread this. Share the word, because let's do this, because I know we got some more questions. But I think just off of what Ebony just said, really triggered the thought of us being mindful that this is all rooted, all right, in our systemic makeup. And it's not, I'm not even saying that to bash, because that's pointless. But I'm saying that to say that we can have this conversation 1,000 times over, but if we can't all come to a collective, and I think we are. I think as people we are. That this is something at the root, and that's that where it needs to be fixed. But again, I just wanted to make sure it was said. Do you guys? I'm sorry, Anna. Did you want to tap into that last question?
I think all of the points that have already been made, I definitely agree with a lot of the points. So I don't really have a lot to add to that, but to talk about about the conversation being had, I do think that more needs to be done, just, more than just conversing.
Yeah. So what advice would you give?
Like I said, I'm a big proponent of education. So starting support groups, reaching out to, if you know somebody, if you see the signs, if you see symptoms, if you see someone who is struggling, maybe a loved one or, someone at work, reaching out to them, seeing if they need someone to talk to, giving them resources if you have any resources, just being more involved in the people that you're around in their lives, and being open to the signs and the symptoms that you're seeing of mental illness. And then if you're not sure what they are, it goes back to the education part, educating yourself on what that may be. I used to we talked about it being Suicide Awareness Month. I used to work for a hotline where people could call and talk about whatever issues they had anonymously, without disclosing, what their name was. So I thought that was very, very beneficial, because it gave those people a safe place to, and for somebody to listen to them. So I think, it starts with just being available to those who are in your circle, who are in your community, and who are around you. Yeah. That's where it starts. So I'm
glad you brought up community. We got Harold here on our timeline. And he asks, how do you deal with mental health as it relates to spirituality, as it deals with religion? So I just want to say that again. How do you deal with mental health as it relates to spirituality?
And really quick, Eric, I just wanted to add something to what Anna was saying, as far as like finding the signs. There's a resource, NAMI.org, NAMI.org is a great resource for people to look at, to find out information about the warning signs. So I just wanted to throw that out there early. I'm sure it's going to be repeated again, but yeah.
So with regards to the spirituality, I'm glad that Anya, say your name for me again.
It's Anna. It's Anna. It's okay. Yeah.
There you go. Sorry, I was confusing it with my daughter's name and your name. Okay. I'm glad that you brought up the education piece, because I think that that's vital. And then Harold kind of chimed in right on time with what I was going to say as the last reason why, African Americans or people of color don't reach out, is because there's this like spiritual slant that is oftentimes projected onto the process of counseling, where sometimes we can run into an intersection of sorts where, people in the clergy community don't necessarily believe in counseling and will guide their parishioners away from the idea of counseling because they think it is too secular, or they believe that it's too focused on elevating self over God or things like that. Some things that I've heard, and, steer them in the direction of saying things like, you don't have faith if you're feeling these feelings, or, labeling feelings and emotional responses as good, bad, or negative, positive emotions, things like that. And so people kind of slide away from it, because in our community, we're more prompt to go to our pastoral community before we come see a counselor. And when they hear that type of language coming from those in leadership, it makes them shy away as well. The latest thing that I've heard is that somehow counselors brainwash you if you were to come sit before them. But spirituality plays a huge role in mental health. God says we shall be renewed and transformed. We shall be transformed by the renewal of our minds. And so in and throughout the Bible, God gives us wisdoms on the importance of prioritizing overcoming certain emotions, or overcoming slave mentalities or unhelpful mindsets. And so when you talk about spirituality, inherently, you have to include the things of the mind, because that is how we're transformed and renewed. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. I think that was a powerful way to look at it. And, also from a Christian perspective, I think, there are examples of Jesus prioritizing his own mental health, going to meditate and having time alone. I'm like, yeah, it's literally right there. So I think that's why it's so important for leaders of all sorts, whether they be in the clergy or just community leaders, telling, elevating the importance of taking care of your mental health. Because it's like, if you're a person of influence, why not use that platform like we're using right now? Why not use that platform to promote something that's going to help people really have agency and control over their own lives and their destiny?
Yeah.
I just think it goes hand in hand.
It really does. And when you really think about it, it feels like one of the first things, it's like a great in between. The first is the box that kind of helped guide our lives was the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, so much so that it's rooted in a lot, as America has, global society, and, our place in it. But then you've transitioned to this place where you got a generation that wasn't born in the Bible or born in the church or born in the religion or born in the spirituality, but was born into technology. I mean, straight out the gate, I'm still I can still remember black and white TV. All right, me and all 8 of my gray hairs right here.
Literally same.
And it's crazy because I got kids asking me, it's like, Mr. Saunders, what did you do when you had heard about Martin Luther King dying? I was like, I'm not that old.
Oh wow, these kids are wild.
But just so that and just perception and I guess so. The follow-up question that I have, and just in that thought, can parents, guardians, or caregivers cause their children to have mental health illness? Who would like to dig into that?
I can.
Go ahead, Miranda.
She said, "Oh, I have a story for you."
I got a few. So a lot of my mental health issues come from trauma that I endured as a child, with step-parent, my mother. My mother was sick throughout a lot of my childhood. So she got diagnosed with cancer, a couple different cancers. So I have a lot of sense of abandonment and things that I haven't endured. My stepfather was very abusive growing up. And all of that still affects me to this day. All of that, the abuse, he abused my mother as well. My mother is bipolar, so I had to deal with her outbursts, her mood swings. And a lot of that fell on me being the oldest child, to take care of my brother when she wasn't able to. So I 100% say yes to parents, caregivers, guardians being a very big piece of the puzzle of mental health. Because if you endure trauma and have PTSD and other types that have stemmed from abuse or traumatic experiences, that stays with you for a long time. And even if you process it, there's still things that trigger it, and things that it can still put you in a dark place.
Yes, I agree wholeheartedly. And I thank you for being that transparent. I mean, I think stories like that need to be shared more often. But my answer to that is absolutely they can. Children can be born into dysfunctional conditions, such as what was shared. Children can develop mental health illnesses as a result of neglect, emotional and physical. Children can develop mental health conditions as a result of fear-based or shame-based parenting, which is something a little bit more subtle, but still causes the same reactions. And they can also be predisposed genetically from family. So in that way, there's a causal relationship as well. So absolutely they can. And it's important that they pay close attention to when there is dysfunction going on, how can I set my child up to have a better quality of life versus, being subjected to the things that either are unhealed in me or is going on in and around our environment.
Would you say that speaks to more to emotional health or mental health? And maybe what is the difference? This is kind of an offset question from one of our viewers right now, but just kind of speaking about what you just described, does that become emotional health or mental health?
I think it's both. Yes, there is a difference. Mental health is dealing more with the psychology of things, the way the mind processes information, the input of information, emotions being that of how the mind is processing things. So if you want to parse it out, emotions are our gut response to the perception of a thing. Our perception occurs, or how we think about the world occurs in our mind. And so however our mind and or our mood is positioning a situation allows the emotion to then be filtered out, and we then have more visible feelings in relation to those thoughts that we carry. Does that make sense? So a lot of times we'll filter things in situations way differently than what they may be because we come from broken backgrounds or traumatic situations, because our mind is influencing the mood and the thoughts that we're having and giving us emotional reactions to that. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I love the way that was explained. Yeah, I had the same reaction.
I could end this. That's so, incredibly described that, yeah. So yeah, that was eloquently described to just kind of process it. And I think, you really spoke to it. This is, look, let me have a sip of water on that.
Yeah. And then Anna, I want to bring you into the conversation, talking about the impact that parents can have. I also think about any adult that is in a young person's life. We just watched with the Olympics, a number of young athletes speak out about their mental health and wellness, and maybe it wasn't tip top at the time, and there was a lot of discussion about that. Talk about the importance of, or if you have any thoughts around that, but the importance of like all adults in a child's life being like cognizant of taking care and prioritizing that young person's mental health.
So I know we have spoken a lot about parents already, and a little bit about if parents can have an effect on a child's mental health. I definitely think, how do I put this? I definitely think that, just to piggyback off that conversation that we had previously, I definitely think that environment and like Kamish, I hope I'm saying your name right, the environment and the biological factors really play a part together. So I'm sorry, repeat your question.
So the question was about the Olympics. So there was a lot of young people that were speaking out about their mental health and wellness. So I wanted you to speak to the importance of all adults in a child's life, like really prioritizing that child's mental health, because now we're dealing with coaches and whoever else. Yeah.
Right. So I had a point that I was going to try to bring together with that. So, but I completely lost it. So I'm sorry. I don't want to get off track. But just to kind of answer your question specifically, I want to make sure I do that. I think it's great that they are having a conversation about it. I think that I've been following it a little bit. I think that, again, to kind of talk about something I mentioned earlier, if someone around you is not going to speak up and is not seeking help, I think it's important for you to advocate for that person, mm-hmm. and to try to help them in any way that you can. If they're reluctant to seek help, I definitely think that, you should at least be a listening ear, try to educate them on the resources. So I feel like I'm not answering your question.
No, you're fine. You're fine. Eric, you've had so much experience with young people, and Miranda mentioned about her tutoring children as well. What has your experience been with that?
Man, so just so you know, I've started working with other people's kids at the age of 16.
Wow.
And so that's literally half my life. And I've seen it on from a camp counselor, from Boys and Girls Club, Big Brothers, Big Sisters, Bloom, Vanguard,
mm-hmm. Yeah.
And juvenile. Mm-hmm. And so it's understanding again just the factors that are playing, and we're talking about the emotional development, the physical development, the mental development, the social development, all these developments, like I said earlier, just in terms of what they're rooted in. And it's just like such a night and day difference from a lot of the students that I have now. It's like widening the gap and just having to feel that they have so many things that just need to be filled in for them, like just on their human side.
You're talking about now versus back in the day? Okay.
Yeah. And like I said, it's just a system, there's different systems for how you're really gaining information. And and I don't mean information in terms of any technology. We still have to process how to walk, how to talk, and things like that. I think for a lot of kids these days, there's a lot being thrown at them, and they don't have any, not much of a strong foundation. I'm not saying that whatever religion, I'm not picking one religion over another, but those religions are still designed to create a foundation in your mind based off of principles to sustain you. And again, whatever rules and regulations that it may have, is still a system that designed to really have an inward process.
And I think that's the key, is understanding it as a system, because we're not specifying whatever faith that is or whatever system that is, but having some sort of a system or a structure is really important to be able to figure that out. And I think about also a system being living within a type of community that feeds off of each other that way. The way we live geographically now is different than the way that we lived 10, 15, 20 years ago. People are more spread out. We're more individualistic, and not to mention, now we're living in a pandemic, which technically we're still not supposed to be around each other anyway. So
pandemic on everything.
Yes, on everything. Yeah.
And that was crazy. I'm gonna use the word crazy, especially not right now during this conversation. but
it's embedded in our culture to use that type of language
to the point where people are legit feeling crazy, even on a strong day. So Harold, I'm sorry. When you talk about mental health versus emotional health, either way, a lot of people, I'm included, we're not medicated, for this, either one. And so it's just, again, finding that balance in between the two. And I know I want to just kind of jump back in with the kids, but it's just, again, really amazing because, I mean, that's a great point. It's a whole different way of how the mind is being structured. And we're definitely in ways and things are being communicated there. You know, you think about how long communication has been around. And I give you an example. When you go back to the movie A Birth of a Nation, remember that? You know, Birth of a Nation? I'm not talking about the one that just came out a couple of years ago. I'm talking about
the original motion picture. Yeah.
And I was just having a conversation with the kids about, you know, they know about races, but it's very, very, very surface. And so when I showed them that in terms of how once upon a time, popular society was impacted by this film because their minds were so impressionable. You know, this was a new mechanism for how things are communicated, and it had an emotional impact, and it triggered fear, and it could triggered a need to fix something, and it kind of resurrected something, and it did that. It literally did that, and it had a documented impact on society. So the same again, how we think about, again, the lack of integrity in this country anyway, and again, using freedom poorly, and that's just where we are. You know, it was a book called The Careless Society. That's a whole nother conversation. Wow.
Yeah.
You know,
can I jump in and piggyback off of that? I think you made some great points, and hopefully I'm following the conversation. One of the things that I think is so vitally important to understand, especially with our children, African-American children, things like that, is one, you know, as far as getting them help and things like that and stewarding them in this new age is we can only take people insofar as we ourselves have gone. And so if parents have not sought out healing, if they've not understood themselves to be under some type of dysfunction, then, you know, they won't necessarily see the importance of helping their children. But two, we have to be particularly careful with our kids, because between the ages of 1 and 5, our children are labeled as hidden ideators. And hidden ideators are children who passively think about suicide. In fact, children between 1 and 5 or 1 and 6 that are African-American are more likely to commit suicide than our Caucasian counterparts. And then to add to that, when they go into teenage years, you know, Indiana was #1 in the nation for a while for having teens commit suicide. Now, typically in the teen years, it's more Caucasian than African-American, but we have to be particularly tuned in, and as Anya described, educated on what to look for in our kids to see where the dysfunctions lie, to understand and have a resource for those things, to develop multidisciplinary teams to approach any one problem with any one kid, so that, you know, someone like a Mr. Saunders isn't standing out on his own when he's dealing with so many kids that he comes across.
Commish, can you speak to how that is determined, that hidden ideator? How is that figured out?
A lot of times kids will verbalize it, but it'll be minimized. My son, for one, you know, we live in Fishers, and it's predominantly Caucasian in his school. And he came home one day and he said, "Mom, can you put lotion on me that stays?" So, you know, lotion is white. So when it goes on, you know, it turns your skin white, and but it fades away after a while, and then your skin color. And he was like, "Well, I want the kind that stays." And I'm like, "Well, what's wrong with your brown skin?" And so we got into that conversation, and it came down to, and he was only in 3rd grade at the time, that he felt like he didn't belong, and therefore he felt like he was unnecessary, or perceivably a disappointment. So it does have a lot to do with culture. It does have a lot to do with kids going through adverse conditions at home, but it mostly has a lot to do with not feeling a sense of belonging or lovability within a child. And so, those two things are what make up the core of mental health. And so if a child experiences that on a regular basis, they will contemplate harming themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And at first, I want to thank you for being transparent with your personal situation. And I think that's very telling.
Mm-hmm.
We had a conversation regarding that same county and around the conversation of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Mm-hmm. And I think the trouble with that, I think a lot of the pushback is coming from a place of fear again, and feeling like this is here to change me because of the color of my skin. And it's very far from that when you talk about stories like this. Is like, sharing your very own, like, no, this community is diversifying, it's changing, and it's all changing. And for us to get back to this thing called community, or not only say back, or actually get to.
Yeah.
This is what's happening in Fishers. This is a first. In terms of, once upon a time, there was a thing as white flight, not with these houses, not with these taxes, no. And because it's a different time, but that does not mean that people are still, collectively saying, oh, we need to understand what our culture is of cohesiveness, of equity, of togetherness actually means. Because, this is 2021 you talk about. This is another generation that is now still experiencing racism. And we all know that it's so rooted in this conversation, especially amongst people of color, when we're talking about identifying ourselves. And so, yeah. And that's on the flip side of that, and I always say this, and I say this as a Black man, many white people, Black people, whoever, don't consider what this young white child is also reinforcing. It has to be stopped on that end too. That child also needs to actually experience humanity without having to compare itself or its skin color with other people, and in such a way where it's reaffirmed that it is dominant based off of that. And that alone, I think, again, that's becomes another generation that's missing the opportunity to truly figure out what it means to be human.
Yeah, but one thing that I am really inspired by is that a lot of these younger kids, some of them are like incredibly open-minded. And I think that for all the perils that social media has and the internet has had on our society, one of the bright spots is the world becoming a little bit smaller and people being able to see folks sooner than later. Like, I remember when I got to college, I went to Ball State, and I met a young man that sat down and ate with me. And I was one of the first Black people he had ever met in real life. And he grew up in Indiana, but in some small town where they had dial-up internet and no Black people. And I was like, this is wild to me that that's a thing. But had he had social media, maybe he would have seen Black people up close a little bit sooner, and it would have helped him. It seemed like he had adapted pretty good because we ate together because he said so. So I'm like, something happened, but I just think that that's one of the things that's kind of promising about the future is looking at how open they are with one another.
Right.
Yeah.
And again, just the whole restructuring of people, this different kind of community, still has to be different colors of respect. They're doing all type of new stuff to disrespect people now.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Eric, the time has come for me to bid you guys adieu. I'm in a class right now, but I do appreciate being your co-host for the time that I did have, and everybody on the panel, and our artists for tonight, and Vaughn in the background, and all the people watching. Thank you all so much, and I'll have to catch the rest of it later.
Well, thank you, Ebony, for being here. Go ahead and get that A and do your best. All right, got me sound like an old uncle over here.
I appreciate it, Uncle Eric. Goodbye.
Thank you. And so, Miranda, I just want to take this time where we got about 20, 30 minutes left, and sometimes I'm like, this is my first time kind of going solo, but that's all right. Miranda, we want to take this moment because you've obviously made some progress there with your painting. And just wanted to highlight to see where you were at with it. Tell us a little bit more about it, what you're feeling, and then I might even throw in a question.
Okay. Well, right now I'm working on bringing out flowers. And what I got done thus far is she has a daisy in her mouth. She has a rose for a heart. And right now it's kind of, it looks a little bit more wholesome than it is. So my concept for this piece is that through my own mental health struggles and such, everybody sees me as this very bubbly, outgoing person. But on the inside, I struggle with mental health on a daily basis. To be honest, like 2 days ago, I hit pretty rock bottom there. And luckily for me, I had a great support system, which is super important for people that are struggling with mental health. I have an amazing partner, and a few of my best friends, reached out and were like, did not leave me alone. They harassed me to get out of the house, and so because they were worried and they cared. So with this piece, it's more or less, not everything is how it seems. You look at your neighbor, you look at your friend, and you don't know the struggles that they've gone through. Not everybody's super open with their mental health. And even though there are treatments, medications, therapy, psychologists, coping mechanisms, there are some people that are still struggling to make those work for them. Myself, are one of those people. And, but like I said, I've been lucky enough to have a really great support system, and that keep me in check. Yeah. So this piece is more or less about mental and emotional growth, and how that I am trying currently to transpire that.
And I appreciate it, because I'm like, as you're talking, I'm looking, at your painting, looking at us. and again, I just always like to take a moment to observe what's going on and what we're seeing over there. And I appreciate, again, you coming out and just sharing your truth. That's awesome. And this is a safe place. I know I shared last month, and my heart, interested that you have a heart out there. My heart really goes to the city of Indianapolis and a lot of what's going on across the country. Case in point, I know yesterday you guys might have saw a young man at a certain high school that resulted to a stabbing in the school, which I don't need to mention or anything like that. And it just made me wonder what's going on through his mind, what's going on through the kids' mind, what's going on to the kids around there. And then I think about the violence that's taking place in this city. I wanted to give a shout out to a good friend, Dana Holman, who recently experienced a great loss. And this is a person who has been nothing but positive, has overcome a lot. And as a parent, a single parent, has really accomplished a lot in raising her children. And so I just wanted to let her know this through this vehicle that I have, that I do appreciate you, and I thank you and what you've done with this community. And but there's a lot of hurt right now in this city, and I say that because I'm one of them. I've known people who committed suicide, like I said before, but I am literally picking up the pieces of my heart as we speak. As has been shared, last August, I lost my father to homicide. And I'm one of those people that can literally ask, how, where does the progress come when there's this, it's a constant of hearts that have been blown to pieces, and people who are not getting back to whole. So like you said, Kamichi, we're born into these systems, but the situations and the trauma, the ongoing trauma, it's just constant. And so I say that because I was thinking that mental health does not necessarily have to be, we're not talking about a certain people. I know we have people of color, but we're not just talking about a certain people. What do you guys think we need to do as a society to make mental health as important as physical health, if not more?
Definitely not make a joke about it. There's a lot of people on, social media, in my personal life, or even in video games, that something doesn't go their way and their automatic reaction is, I'm going to go kill myself. Or, a simple dose of sadness, somebody's like, oh, I'm depressed, or I'm this, I'm that, or, a lot of people that are clean freaks that will joke about how they have OCD when they don't. A lot of this causes, I guess, a sense that mental health isn't serious. Mm-hmm. And that causes the people that do need to seek help and treatment, it causes them to feel some type of way about, well, maybe they're not going to take me as seriously because, that's something that everybody says. Mm-hmm. So I think that's definitely a really big problem in our society.
Yeah, I agree. I think that we definitely need to change the language that we use, using serious mental health issues as descriptors for colloquial reasons or, conjecture or what have you, to joke with our friends or just using it loosely. I always hear people say, oh, you're crazy. Well, even that can stop a person from, being willing to reach out, even though you're being funny and joking with one another. So we need to shift our stance on that. But with regards to trauma healing, even if you are not a believer in God, so to speak, is a spiritual journey. When you have trauma is an intense or extreme form of anxiety, right? You can feel very disconnected from self and very disjointed from anyone else. And so because of that, you're walking around almost in a hypervigilant state, not knowing where the next injury is going to come in or take place. And it's very difficult for then you to receive some level of peace in your mind because you're constantly rehearsing that traumatic experience. Fear, trauma, or anxiety paralyzes your sense of self. It keeps you stuck in the moment of the trauma, perceived or not. And so in order to overcome it, we have to recognize how it leads to very spiritual issues like a loss of awe, a loss of spontaneity, a loss of willingness to connect with people, and understand how do we start to put the pieces back together. And for that, it does take some level or layer of mental health counseling. It's a process. There's no anecdotal thing that any one therapist or any one person can give you to say, hey, do this, and you will then overcome the grief and loss and trauma of what you've experienced. It's all individualized. So in order to get that type of treatment, you definitely need to sit before a counselor who can walk with you to put the puzzle pieces back together of your life.
And on that note, if I can add, I think another thing that is super intimidating, a friend and I just had this conversation. And one thing that she was upset about is that she's had therapists and counselors in the past that she couldn't connect with. And I think it is very important to let people know that it's okay to shop around for a therapist. It's okay to shop around for a counselor because they are there in their job to help you. Mm-hmm. So it's not going to offend them if you were like, okay, we don't vibe, like we don't connect. I don't feel a sense of connection with you to share my problems wholeheartedly. And as that being their job, they are going to be 100% understandable, And so I think that is very important to get out there, is that it is okay to go from therapist to therapist, even if it's just one visit. Yes. Until you feel comfortable enough that you can sit there and have a conversation, a deep conversation, and be able to feel exposed. That way you can get past and work past your traumas.
Absolutely. I agree. I tell everybody, not every therapist is for every person. You have to find the therapist that you can connect with. And so if a therapist is secure in what she's doing, she will help you find someone. Because like you said, it's about the client. It's not about us.
Mm-hmm. Man, I needed this conversation. I was listening, I was like, wow, this is some really great advice for myself. And I hope for, folks that are watching today. Anna, would you like to tag on to that question?
No, I totally agree with that point. Yes, it's definitely important to do that too. I wanted to piggyback on something that we had spoken about before with the parents. With social media specifically, having worked with kids before, that can be an avenue in which kids experience some level of trauma through, kids, there's different things out there. There's, TikTok now, of all the things, but it's important to be aware of what your child is engaging in and, who they're around and what they're seeing, because, that's just such a critical, they're developing, who they are. And if you're not in that part of your child's life, it's difficult to know what's going on. So a part of getting help for your child, if you don't know what's going on, it's hard to know what type of help they need. So I think that's just an important piece, to just be aware of what your child is seeing and what they're doing with their time, especially on social media nowadays. So I just wanted to interject that thought.
It does. It makes a huge difference. Like I said, being in school, it's like I said, it's new, and it definitely, somewhere in there needs to be a filter to where is there overload for this kid? Am I learning my emotions through my interaction through social media, what I'm seeing, and to me, that's kind of where a lot of what's going on is being reflective of, like, if I'm just scrolling up and down, just looking at this, and I'm doing this for hours at a day, this is what kids are doing. When I think about when I'm 13 years old, I thought about what I was doing hours at a day, and I was like, okay, I was outside a lot. I was playing sports. I wasn't in the video games as much, but I did watch a lot of television. Watch a lot of television that made me laugh, and so that's what. And I like to make people laugh, but there was no phone, and it was for a whole different reason. So now this generation has phones. They have televisions with huge cable packages. Some, not all, don't get it twisted. But no matter what social economic level you're at, you know what I'm saying? You don't have to be rich to have a phone. You know what I'm saying? I just want a phone, and I wanted to be able to engage in this world. And the trouble that I've even seen with that, with young people, is that you're also doing things, and you're socializing over this phone and doing things over this phone that might lead to, some sexually, might lead to where you don't even know what the laws are and what you're breaking, and what can be used and against you, that could criminalize you. And so again, just that awareness, but again, there's no sense of what's really guiding the morality in it. Yeah. So
I honestly feel like I think you're right. The filter has to be the parents or the caregiver. My son is going into his freshman year of high school, and he still does not have a phone because emotionally, psychologically, he's not prepared for that level of responsibility. And until he shows himself capable, he won't have a phone. He's aware of that. He's also aware that I talk about that often. So his friends don't know him.
Right, as if like right, but you know what? It's a blessing.
Yeah.
Like, I hope he can see the blessing in that.
Well, I'm okay with holding until you're ready. I don't need to do what the world is doing. I don't need you to fit in. I need you to prioritize your readiness in things. And if you're not ready, let's not jump in until we can grow to a position where we can handle what we're being given. Yeah. And therefore not take advantage of it or misuse it.
Absolutely.
Does that make sense?
No,
so the filter has to be the parents. The filter has to be the caregiver.
And it has to be. But then I think the flip question will be that how do they do it? How do they come to that awareness that it has to be them? When you got some folks, parents that are stuck in the phone, in the matrix as well, or stuck in a pattern of a trauma, or generational hurt, pain, abuse, what have you. And so again, I think it kind of all ties in to where even that parent realizing and not being ashamed to say, "Yo, I need some help."
That's where it exists. That's where they become clued into, okay, this is unhealthy for me. And so it has to be unhealthy for my kid.
And this being able to no, this is not normal, but this is the only normal that I've ever known. Mm-hmm. So, what wakes people up to saying your normal is it's halting things. It's not allowing us to move forward without this kind of seeming like so as a society, what are we actually conforming to collectively to say, man, yo, we need to try to make things better. We need to come to an agreement on some things without, I don't know, making it seem like I don't want to say a socialist society or a communist society. I don't know.
Well, we can't.
I don't even care about those terminologies. Maybe it's a new term that we're moving toward anyway. Just
it's awareness. I think it's awareness. It's all about bringing into awareness healthy versus unhealthy. I don't need you to conform to anything. I just need you to be aware of the residual effects and impact of the behaviors that you currently have. I'm not here to judge you or dictate to you, but these things have residual impacts. And so you have to make a choice on what you're comfortable continuing to live within, or if you're willing to step outside and take the blue pill, right? And disconnect and see more clearly.
Yeah. I talked to a nephew of mine, currently incarcerated. And, but we were having, conversations and have been. And I said, man, are you getting you got a Bible around there? He said, well, I ain't really into religion. And I said, okay, I get that. I said, but you was in that courtroom and people go in that courtroom and then they got to put their hand on that Bible. Mm-hmm. Obviously, there's something about that Bible that has power to where somebody begins to testify on it, gives a certain integrity or validation to what's going to actually happen to your life. So if you don't want to do it from the religion person, you still need to understand what kind of power that is in the contents of this item that is very much so intertwined in the judicial system of our society. Mm-hmm. You know, so it's like almost kind of reframing things for again, this our younger generation, those are coming up in a way, because they're not going to get it the way we got it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, how we came up. It's just not going to happen. I mean, we can, you know, try as much as we may, but sometimes I want my OGs back. You know,
Yeah.
uncles and the aunties. I remember I remember very few days when it seemed like everybody was together, but in that togetherness, there was a whole lot of trauma and a lot of skeletons.
Trauma bonding. And honestly, too, you have to understand, seek to understand instead of giving direction. A lot of, millennials of sorts shy away from religion or things like that because of legalistic views, right, wrong, good, bad, and those things being kind of thrown at them. So seeking to understand the reason why he has yet to open it up and meet him where he's at, will go a lot further than, hey, don't you want, to kind of see what's in this or what gives it power and things like that. And then not starting them at a position of understanding what was old, but starting at what was new, knowing that they are loved unconditionally, regardless of who they are or what they have been. Mm-hmm. And so I really think we get a lot further, a lot faster when we go in seeking to understand someone else's views on a thing versus giving them to-dos and things like that. So.
Okay,
sorry, that might have taken the conversation.
About push-ups too, but
what does push-ups do, right?
So we are about 13 minutes out, and so I just want to really kind of get into any last remarks from our conversation that resonate and you think that are relevant as we keep the conversation moving forward. If you want to just kind of tap into that, and if you want to just offer some advice to someone who might need mental health service but are too afraid. So I just want to give you again this opportunity, our panelists. Thank you, and just would like to hear your last remarks for our panel. I'll start with you. Let's see, Miranda.
Oh, you're gonna start with me? Oh Lord.
Yeah. And we're gonna have Kamise close us out.
So my advice, honestly, is as intimidating as it is to reach for help and to get that help that you need. I think a lot of it comes with self-awareness and knowing that, hey, I know that I can get better, but I don't know the steps to take. So just like if you were going on any kind of adventure and like in the woods, you would have a tour guide, and that tour guide could be a close friend, that could lead you to getting in therapy. And if you know somebody that is having issues with their mental health or struggling in that aspect, then subtly try to reassure them that they're not crazy, they're not, they're not weird, they're not in the wrong, there's nothing wrong with them. They just need the tools to help go through it. And I think it's important to just let people know and reassurance, honestly. Reassurance, even if it's self-reassurance, is super big, because everything is going to be okay eventually, even if it's not right this second. There's always an out when you go in something, there's always an exit. And I think it's important to reiterate that it's not, even though everything is super dark and you can't see, there is always going to be an exit. And the exit isn't ending your life or feeling that standstill. You can always go to a better area in life, even though you're struggling. And it's hard, and it's really hard when you feel like everything's against you and you feel like you're overcome with this darkness, and just reaching out to get that light is that should be reassurance enough that you are wanting to fight, and that it's just, we as a community need to open up that door. Whether that's even just posting on Facebook and being like, hey, if you need a stranger to vent to, like my handle is underneath my name. If like, you can always reach out to me. You can always talk to me, and I'd be willing to talk to somebody, So I think it's really important to just open that door for somebody, because sometimes they don't always see that path.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much, Miranda. And I see that you have completed your piece back there.
I'm probably still going to work on it tonight.
Can you hold it up so that we can kind of see it squarely? Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, she's definitely looking at us. That's wonderful. That's beautiful. Thank you. Thank you so much.
And thank you guys for having me.
And thank you for being here. Thank you for being here.
So I want to just say, Miranda, I thank you for bringing that part up or reiterating it, to really be that person of, that provides support. If you know someone who needs that support, or if you know of someone who needs a listening ear, just to be that person. And then I want to just reiterate just education, the importance of educating yourself on the resources that are available to you in your community. I know before we, Ebony mentioned the NAMI website, and I second that. That website has tons of information on, resources that you can access on the different types of therapy and the signs and symptoms and things like that. So that's very beneficial. But just educating yourself, if someone needs help, educating them, being a listening ear for them, and just providing that support. We're all in this together at the end of the day, and we just need to, I feel, come together, as a community and help one another out and just be kind to one another. So you never know what someone is going through. So, just be that person that's, willing to be kind, and you never know how you can help someone, who's in need. So
thank you so much. Wise words. And like I said, we're all going through it, and considering this whole COVID shift of mind and being considerate. So, but thank you. Thank you so much again for being here and sharing your words. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. So glad I could be a part. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, come on. Yeah.
Well, I'll just end by answering Veronica's question about parents who don't know how to help themselves. I would just simply say, move at the pace of grace and seek out counsel so that you will know how to help yourself and help your children. But I'll close just by saying, challenging times such as this give us genuine, authentic cause for pause. Meaning that if we don't pay close attention to the mental and emotional stress over time, it will accumulate and become chronic stress and develop, will take a huge toll on your mental, emotional, and spiritual capacities. And so we have to be willing to sit still with ourselves long enough to recognize where we're hurting, where we're suffering. So I would just simply say, give yourself permission to be radically open and honest with yourself. Enough to recognize, to listen to yourself, and to address any areas that may be causing impairments in function, whether it be relationally, vocationally, whether it be physically or psychologically. And lastly, make a conscious, intentional effort to walk in self-awareness and not self-denial, because there's freedom, clarity, deepened insight, a shift in heart posture, and an understanding of purpose on the other side of your healing journey.
Hey, ladies and gentlemen, I feel like we just got like a free counseling session.
You did.
You're like we did.
My invoice. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, no. That's free marketing, homie. No, but and I say that in how, very impactful. So thank you for sharing that. I appreciate you for accepting the invitation to be here. And you say your practice is out in Fishers?
It's in Carmel, but right now we're all telehealth. So really we reach everybody. So
you provide one-to-one counseling or?
So we do family, individual, group, couples, and we also we have a mental health ministry where we go into the church and we provide services for pastoral leadership and pastors alike.
And you guys, you sound qualified, legit. Do you, and is this through a church?
So we actually are contracted with multiple churches right now, but typically it's more so with pastors reaching out to our agency for our mental health ministry, which is called First Shepherds.
And I'm glad that you, that's a great way to kind of segue out, because that's good to hear that churches are reaching out to a more, a different way of resolving the situation. And dealing with mental health versus just trying to pray it out. And it's not saying, don't do it, but in a way to where, and I was even told by, one of my elders, like, hey man, if you need to go to therapy, go to therapy. I'm not talking church, therapy, and understanding the difference. And so great show tonight. Wasn't a show, it was a community conversation. We're not doing this to entertain. That's why you're a part of the conversation. That's why we got folks from all over the city, all over the state, who have come and spoken to Tamika Catchings and Mr. Saunders, the Green-Eyed Bandit. I want to thank Ebony Chappelle for coming on, Veronica for again working backstage, and Vaughn working backstage. And I actually wanted to go ahead and leave you out with a bit of a poem. If that's okay, I'll get a thumbs up. If can I do that? I'm gonna share my little art, and I'm a spoken word artist, but I'll get into it as for as long as I can. But I wrote this some years ago, and but here we go. There's no title. All right. Your soul won't sing laughs, red eyes seem so sad. Tell me, why do you have so much dark in your heart with light in your hands? This question burns like brandy poured over a fresh fat branding. Omits its miss and starts landing on my lanes of misunderstanding. And to attempt to answer it burns like the balance of a tip of a lit candlestick. Stays scarred like backs that never forget when flesh splits to the rip. And as for me, I got the nerve to feel like a functional catastrophe. Such a particular perspective to be lonely. So much that believers will call it blasphemy and would condone me. A dual-minded menace made of magic, so they probably stone me for my actions or the lack thereof. Daily, I feel like the sun within a dove who can't die enough to be worthy of love. I've fallen and I can get up, but I don't know if I want to command the core of the matador of the bull, because I don't know what I'm standing for. I don't want to get knocked down. So I go ahead and voluntarily lay my face to the floor and get real familiar with the ground, listen to the sounds instead of getting punched in the head in cycles repeated. Forget this, I forfeit, I'm defeated before I throw a punch or even take a punch, to see if I can take a punch one after the other and keep standing, to keep a smiling grit while the punches keep landing, to keep taking these hits while my spirit keeps dancing, floating like a butterfly and being more than a man. Purging past the pain of a helicopter fan, taking out my wrath in the river of the dam. Now, I don't know if I'm a blessing or a blurting to my fam, because my soul won't sing laughs, red eyes seem so sad. Tell me, why do you have so much dark in your heart with light in your hands? There's more, but that's all I have to share for tonight. That's our time. Thank you again for everybody coming through. Another episode of Community Conversations. Join us next month. same time, as we're going to get into some more community conversations. Thank you. Thank you so much. Share, like. See you next month. Bye.